morning, everyone. My name is Clifford Boyle. I'm from Kyushu University. Yes, so the title was just something that was given in many months ago, so I didn't spend too much time thinking about it, so I'd also appreciate if no one here spends too much time thinking about it either. What I'd like to talk about, I'll begin with sort of thinking about why Japan is in the project, and I've been invited to take part in this, and thank you, Emmanuel, for the invitation to both Borders in Globalization and this Jean Monnet Network project. It's been an extremely fruitful, rich opportunity to think through some things. Why Japan is, as well as being an outlier in the study, Japan's been interesting to think about for two reasons relating to the project. The first is this perception of crisis, or this understanding of crisis that has been applied to the EU migration debate, and Japan is sort of experiencing its own crisis of migration and border control. And in the Japanese case, this is partly just this greater presence of difference within Japan. And 2015 is again a crucial year here, because between 2014 and 2015, the number of foreign entries into Japan multiplies by a factor of 4 or 5. So you go from about 5 million people coming into Japan a year to 18 million. I think the current number is about 26 million. People coming into the country. These are mostly people staying for short term, but it is the presence of non-Japanese in the country that leads to this perception of Japan changing or becoming less homogenous. And in addition to that, there is this vast increase in refugee numbers, again from a similar time. So in European terms, these are very small numbers. But in Japan, where the infrastructure is not in place, it has also led to this perception of crisis. So last year, I think it was 20,000 refugee applications, of whom 6 were accepted, were recognized. So I think that's the 2017 number. The 2018 number has halved again, and I'm not entirely clear why this is, so I actually need to look into the data a bit more. The second reason why I think Japan is very important is what Emmanuel was mentioning about this coordination of policy, and I think we see this very strongly in the Japanese case, both with regards to what I'm going to talk about, which is more border security, or how borders are maintained, and then also Naomi is going to do the heavy lifting on the migration side. But again, we're seeing the same coordination of policy around specific issues. In the Japanese case, it's particularly marked because the way the Japanese government has worked has traditionally been very segmented into individual ministries and with much control by bureaucrats. And what the current administration is doing is pulling all this authority out of the ministries and centering it in the Cabinet Office itself, and setting up new divisions within the Cabinet Office to manage things like what I'll talk about here, this, the Centre for Public Policy Coordination on Sovereignty and Territory, which is one of these new institutes, but migration has also had a similar process in place. So just thinking with regards to Japan's borders, and this is, because we're also thinking about this in terms of borders in globalization. So this is Japan's 3 territorial disputes. This has been interesting in driving change, because up until about 2012, 2013, each of these disputes were handled in a strictly bilateral fashion. There's only in April 2014, this map appears on the Ministry of Foreign Affairs website, putting all these disputes within a similar framework, essentially. And this has been how policy has been driven, this process of homogenizing how these disputes are understood. And we see this in this map that's produced by the policy coordination group that I was mentioning. But what's also interesting also is from the map, you see how maritime areas are also incorporated into the shape. So the question that the map asks is, do you know the shape of Japan? So here the shape of Japan is not just the archipelago, the islands, but also the maritime spaces that surround that island. So we surround these islands. So we see this increasing incorporation of these maritime spaces into understandings of what Japan is. And this is being driven from top down. So over the past 15 years, we've seen this emergence of a border studies community within Japan, led by the moderator of this session for much of it. And this has particularly looked at three issues, I think. So the first one has been to look at these sort of now marginal areas in history, and how these histories of human mobility that extended beyond the current borders of Japan. So particularly in terms of how these places functioned or existed within the wider Japanese empire, and how their worlds contracted as the Japanese nation-state emerged after the Second World War. And also how these former histories of mobility could be drawn upon to revitalize these island spaces, these marginal spaces at the end of the nation. And then finally, more conventionally, how these islands can be secured in the face of a variety of challenges. One of the most obvious of which is actually the evacuation of people from these formerly populated spaces. So most of these islands experience extreme depopulation. Japan itself is now, as of 2008, losing population, but it is most marked in these island spaces. So since 1956, the population of Japan has increased by 50%, but the population of these islands has decreased by 65%. So it's already at very, very minimal levels. But as this map, again, this is from the same office, an updated version of the one I showed earlier, but maintaining population on these islands is vital for maintaining this shape of Japan. So this is where the focus is now. So last year, sorry, this is such a mouthful, but I will say it. So Japanese legal terminology does not translate well into English, but the Act on Special Measures Concerning Conservation of Inhabited Remote Border Islands and Maintaining Local Communities on Specific Inhabited Remote Border Islands. So I'd like you all to repeat that back to me at the end. But this is what on the right, this is what this act is showing. So the specific inhabited remote border islands are those in red. This is where specific economic support is being put in place to try and maintain populations on these islands. Also, okay, yes. All right, sorry, I'll go quickly. So yes, so I think because of this connects the discourse around these islands to that of migration, in that it is about how to maintain Japan as a nation through both people coming into the country, but also their channeling into specific areas. And this is also what we're starting to see in the migration policy, also refugee policy. Refugees are now being allocated to specific districts and sent there with the specific intention that they contribute to agriculture communities and so forth. And so this is I think this is going to be, connecting this discourse to how these islands are maintained is actually going to be interesting as we look into the future. So I had some more to say, but anyway, I'll stop there and hand over to now.
Just one information back to the islands.
Yeah.
So probably you are curious why these islands not left, because these are far remote people living. This is the reason of this law, because these islands are specially promoted by big money, but these islands not far remote have no legal basis. So it means a different framework, different law framework. It means that no unified policy of border islands in Japan. This is kind of additional. Thank you.